Before you listen to this BBC podcast, I'd like to introduce myself. My name's Stevie Middleton and I'm a BBC Commissioner for a load of sport podcasts. I'm lucky to do that at the BBC because I get to work with leading journalists, experienced pundits and the biggest sports stars. Together we bring you untold stories and fascinating insights straight from the players' mouths. But the best thing about doing this at the BBC is our unique access to the sporting world. What that means is that we can bring you podcasts that create a real connection to dedicated sports fans across the UK. So if you like this podcast, head over to BBC Sounds where you'll find plenty more.
BBC Sounds. Music, radio, podcasts.
Hello and welcome to the Scottish Football Podcast, your indispensable guide to everything you need to know about our national game. It's Thursday, the 16th of May. I'm Jonathan Sutherland, and here is what's coming up.
Pulls it across, O'Reilly can make it 5! On a glittering, sparkling night for the champions!
Celtic are officially champions as they clinch the title at Kilmarnock. Also,
I thought we were really good tonight and against a strong county side. So going into Sunday, hopeful as always.
St Johnstone rescue a point at home to Ross County. We'll also take a look at the Championship playoff and...
Graham flicks on, it might yet work out, it has worked out absolutely beautifully for Blair Alston.
Can Partick Thistle peg back Raith Rovers as they fight for the right to face St Johnstone or Ross County?
This is the Scottish Football Podcast.
We are joined on the Scottish Football Podcast this morning by Rory Loy, the former Rangers, Carlisle, Dundee and Falkirk striker, and the Scottish football correspondent for the Times, Michael Grant. Good day to you both. Rory, a lot going on last night. I'm always interested in terms of how people consume their football when there's so many things happening. How did you do it?
How did I do it? Well, I sat down at the start of the night and I expected Celtic to win. I didn't expect Celtic to win 5-0. So it was good to watch that. A lot of good goals, a lot of good play. And my goodness, what a massive, massive goal in the last minute for St Johnstone to make things ever so tense at the weekend.
Yeah, lots to delve into. Michael Grant, where were you stationed last night?
I was in my front room, Jonathan. I was watching two matches at the same time, so I feel quite clever with myself. I was watching Aberdeen Livy from a personal interest, and I had another screen on Celtic because I knew you'd be asking me about them this morning.
You've done your homework, but you also led with your heart and your head. Good on you, Michael. We'll delve into all of this right now, in fact. Let's run through the latest Scottish football news. An emotional Brendan Rodgers admits that he was blown away by his team's level of performance in last night's resounding Rugby Park rout, and proud of how his players have dealt with the pressure. Kevin O'Hara's spectacular strike helped Hamilton Academical to a first leg win in their Scottish Championship playoff final against Inverness Caledonian Thistle. Striker O'Hara opened the scoring for the hosts in 6 minutes with a stunning effort from 35 yards. The sides meet in the second leg on Saturday, 5:30, live on BBC Alpha and the BBC Sport website. Celtic's bid for their first SWPL title remains in their own hands going into the final round of games. After a commanding win against Hearts, Helena Sadiku's side are still level on points with Joe Potter's team, but their goal difference was extended to 16 going into Sunday's final day after Hibs' late goal in Edinburgh cut their win to a 1-goal margin. Let's start with Kilmarnock versus Celtic, which finished 5-0 to the champions. They make it 3 in a row in terms of the titles, 12 in 13 years. Celtic finishing the campaign very strongly. In terms of the performance last night, Rory Loy, incredible. You'd have expected perhaps it to be a bit tighter. Kilmarnock have had such a great season, but Celtic clearly had the bit in their teeth.
They did. I think with the result at the weekend, the way they're playing at the moment, I know they've struggled at Kilmarnock this year, home and away, but I did expect Celtic to win the game. But to win it 5-0 in the manner in which they did, I was at my boys' football last night doing a bit of coaching between 7 and 8, and then I got back in the car, straight up the road to watch the game. And, 3-0 by the time I get in the house, and then you're sitting watching the rest of it, and, Matt O'Reilly getting a couple, James Forrest getting a goal. It's credit to Brendan Rodgers and his team because they've handled the pressure. They came good, at the right time in the season, and Rangers have capitulated. So, well done to Brendan Rodgers and his side.
It's a sobering reminder, Michael, isn't it, about the gulf that can exist between the old firm and everyone else. And I guess also an exercise in psychology when there's something so tangible on the line for those Celtic players, as it was last night, how it can impact performance. In terms of Celtic overall and Brendan Rodgers, cast your mind back to, I guess, the start of this year, maybe February, thereabouts. Some people were actually tipping Rangers as slight favourites in terms of the title race. What's your appraisal, now it's official, of Celtic as title winners?
Well, they deserve it. They've played the best football over the season. It's been a patchy season from them. I think Brendan Rodgers has been vindicated in his view that when he had all his main players available, fit again, it would start to show in the form, and it would start to show in the results. And that's certainly been the case in the last few weeks. They've finished the campaign really strongly. They've come alive, as he said they would. I mean, they have struggled at times. Carter Vickers was out for a long time. Hatate missed big chunks of the season. McGregor missed a bit as well. You would also say that the signings over the two windows, with the honourable exception of Adam Ida, have not made big impressions, really. I thought it was significant that the team that started for them against Rangers at the weekend had no players from this summer's signings or January signings. So he went with the old guard in that sense. But and the one other thing that is significant, I think, is this view that Celtic have been over the course before. They are composed and cool in the run-in when there is a bit of pressure on them. And you're right, Jonathan, because Rangers were slight favourites at one point because they went 2 points clear, Rangers, in February. They won at St Johnstone to go 2 points clear, same number of games played. And it was like, okay, this is real pressure being applied on Celtic. But we then saw, as Rory says, Rangers capitulate. That they lost to Motherwell, they lost to Ross County, they drew at Dundee. They couldn't make any impression really on the derbies. The derbies were really significant this season. Celtic took 10 points in them. Rangers took 1. So that has been the story of the season in a nutshell. And Celtic finishing very strongly, looking very strong already for next season, and playing really good football as the curtain comes down on the campaign.
Inevitably, we cast forward, Rory, and the next big thing is, of course, the Scottish Cup final. Celtic finishing this season strongly. Do you make them favourites for the Cup final? Big favourites?
Yes, I do. I said on Sports Sound on Tuesday I was at Ibrox. I think your main hub of Rangers starters over the last 5-6 years, whatever it may be, I've got far too used to losing big games against Celtic. I think they struggle mentally to cope with it. James Tavernier has played 29 league games against Celtic since he signed. If you take into consideration the ones that actually matter, so for example, they beat Celtic at the back end of last season 3-0, but the league was won. In games that matter, James Tavernier's when the league was still on the line, he's played 27 games and has a win percentage against Celtic of 18%. So you look at the Cups as well, and they've probably been a little bit more successful in the one-off games in terms of the Cups. So that'll probably breathe a little bit of life into the likes of, Lundstrom, Tavernier, Goldson. I know Goldson's not available, but these mainstays that have watched Celtic be so much more successful than them over the last few years, I just think the mental edge belongs to Celtic. Not only that, I do believe with the team they've got on the pitch at the moment, back to full fitness, and the injuries Rangers have got, I would make, not slight, I would make them overwhelming favourites, Jonathan.
Would you go along with that, Michael?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, sometimes when one of the old firm team needs to win a final derby, really needs to win it desperately to kind of save the season, that can happen. But I agree with Rory. I think Celtic have too many big game old firm players, guys who always step up in this match. Callum McGregor especially, but also Maeda, Furuhashi, O'Reilly, Carter Vickers. So I think they'll have too much for them. But listen, I mean, I don't think there's an enormous gap between the clubs that it's inconceivable that Rangers would win. I don't think that's the case, but I do think Celtic would be a strong favourite.
Yeah, huge congratulations to Celtic for their title victory. Fantastic achievement. And your mind thinks ahead to the summer transfer window and what Brendan Rodgers will want to do with that. But I think we might have to leave that until maybe after the Cup final. We'll get into that very soon. Lots to talk about in terms of the summer and how that will shape up. Let's go down to the bottom of the Premiership table. St Johnstone versus Ross County. It would end 1-1. St Johnstone rescuing a point in the 90th minute. Last minute Adama Sidibe equaliser means that it is still all to play for on Sunday. St Johnstone are away at St Johnstone, I should say. Yeah, they are away at Motherwell. Ross County at home to Aberdeen. Just in terms of the mechanics of it all, if Ross County win, they are safe. St Johnstone need 3 points. And then hope that Ross County do not win against Aberdeen. That is basically the long and the short of it. Who is going to finish second bottom, Rory Loy?
Oh, that's a difficult one. Aberdeen have had Ross County's number this season, so that'll probably be weighing heavy on the minds of the Ross County players. And Motherwell are a side that will face St Johnstone, who are quite unpredictable. So I'm really, really looking forward to the games on Sunday. I have to say, it's going to be tense. It's going to be nervous. And you asked me about the cup final. I said they were overwhelming favourites. In terms of who's going to finish second bottom in the league, I haven't a clue. I really don't know. And that's what excites me the most about it, is that I'm going to go into the games, that round of games, not having a clue who's going to finish second bottom. But my goodness, did that last minute equaliser last night set it up beautifully for the weekend.
I was very pleased on a very selfish level because I am presenting Sports Scene on Sunday and I did want it to at least be interesting. So it will definitely be interesting. We should say Ross County playing against Aberdeen. Obviously, Aberdeen thrashed Livingston last night 5-1. They're ending the season very well. Michael Grant, as I'm sure you'll be delighted to see, of course. Yeah, I mean, it is quite simple from a St Johnstone point of view. They have to beat Motherwell, which they haven't managed all season. It's been 3 draws. And then they still have to hope that Ross County don't win against Aberdeen. A draw would be okay from a St Johnstone point of view, presuming St Johnstone win against Motherwell, because St Johnstone's goal difference is better than Ross County's. But do you have any inclination how that's going to shake down?
It's tight, isn't it? Wow, it's really tight. That goal is fascinating because we know how big, late winners, late equalisers, momentum changes. It can be really significant in these kind of relegation dogfights, and you just think, does that give St Johnstone a lift that they've really needed for a long time now? That game was heading to defeat, they were heading to the playoffs, and all of a sudden they've got a lifeline. I think it's perfectly possible they can go to Motherwell and win. Motherwell don't really have anything to play for. Problem with St Johnstone is they don't normally score enough goals. But they don't. They just haven't got enough firepower that you could bank on them. Ross County will be worried about how Aberdeen are playing at the moment. Aberdeen are playing with a real freedom. There's an enjoyment about Aberdeen's play. They've got energy in the side. There's goals in the side. They'll want to finish with a win themselves. They want to finish top of the bottom 6. It's a pretty thin consolation for their league season, but it's better than nothing. So, listen, I think you would still look at Ross County because the 2 points is a big lead going into the final game of the season. But St Johnstone have given themselves a chance, and I wouldn't be surprised if they won on Sunday, isn't it?
Also last night, it was the Championship playoff final first leg. Hamilton Accies versus Inverness Caley Thistle. It finished 2-1 to Hamilton. I don't know if you saw the goal last night, Kevin O'Hara. You saw it, Rory. Spectacular strike, hugely unlucky for the Inverness keeper, Mark Ridgers. People that haven't seen it, basically O'Hara's strike from, I think it was maybe 40-odd yards, looped over the keeper, hit off the post, and rebounded into the goal off the back of the unfortunate keeper, Mark Ridgers. Still a brilliant goal. And it was looking very grim at one point for Inverness Caley Thistle last night, wasn't it, Rory? But they've got that lifeline. Do you see them getting over the line in the Highland capital on Saturday night, or do you think Hamilton Accies are the favourites now?
Well, it's interesting you say you felt sorry for the goalkeeper, because as a striker, I felt sorry for Kevin O'Hara, because anyone going on the raps or their phones or anything will be looking at a Ridgers own goal, and that would really, really annoy me if I was Kevin O'Hara.
So does he not get the goal bonus, do you think?
No, well, I can't imagine the Hamilton chairman would be paying him a goal bonus for that, no. They'll probably pat him on the back and say, well done, but I don't think he'll be handing him a goal bonus.
Rules are rules, yep.
Yeah, well, maybe if they stay up, I don't know, they might get it, but, if they go up,
yeah,
it's a difficult one to call, isn't it? I mean, that goal again is massive. Michael used the word fascinating. It's another fascinating one, isn't it? Because Inverness notoriously have, I know they've struggled over the last few years, but, a good home record. It's not a place that I don't think many players that I've played with certainly like to go. So Duncan Ferguson's going to need to use that to his advantage. But, I covered Inverness in his first game in charge, and, they look good and they pass the ball well. But I think it's went backwards slightly. I think his inexperience in management's maybe shown a little bit in terms of, not really sticking to what he said he was going to do when he first came in, and it's a little bit more direct now. It's not as easy on the eye, and you've got Hamilton at the other end who have got momentum and things like that. So whilst I think Inverness will still be in with a shout, I would back Hamilton to go up.
Wow, and that would be a huge, huge blow for Inverness Caley Thistle, obviously. I mean, it wasn't that long ago, Michael, that Caley Thistle were competing playoff-wise in terms of replacing the Premiership, and obviously under Billy Dodds as well, getting to the Scottish Cup final not that long ago. And then here we suddenly are. They're on the cusp of League One next season, and it feels like a pivotal moment in the already, the very short managerial career of Duncan Ferguson so far. It didn't quite work out for him down south, obviously, in his first gig. And now here at Caley Thistle, this is the crunch game of all crunch games now coming up for him on Saturday night.
Yeah, I mean, that Scottish Cup final you're talking about was only last season, Jonathan, and they competed really well with Celtic, Inverness, but it feels like ancient history, and I know how much tension and nervousness there's going to be around Inverness, the club, the town, city as it is now, about this match, because for them to go down to the third tier is going to be economically disastrous for them. The prospect of part-time football, the prospect of being down there for a while, bad enough to be in the Championship, but to be in the third tier is even worse in terms of income. The club has already got financial issues. They've been trying to get this battery farm going, haven't they, in Inverness, and have run into planning obstructions to that. So, you cannot underemphasise or underestimate the severity of the situation for Inverness if they to go down, and that will show on the management and the players, won't it? That tension will be there. I think, as Rory says, if you're Hamilton, you'll fancy yourselves here, and you'll think, right, we're the ones that can play with a bit of freedom here, because they've got promotion to play for. They can go up, and they've had a successful season up to this point, largely. Whereas Inverness, it's been a struggle. So I still think it could go either way, but you wouldn't be surprised if Hamilton pull this off.
It will be box office viewing on BBC Alapa on Saturday night at 5:30. Finally, let's look ahead to tomorrow night and some more box office viewing. Raith Rovers versus Partick Thistle in the Premiership Playoff semi-final, second leg. As you'd expect, it is live with us on Sports Scene. Raith Rovers take a 2-1 lead into it after that pulsating first leg at Firhill on Tuesday. And from what you saw, Rory, how will it unfold tomorrow night at Starks Park? Obviously, Raith Rovers got their noses in front. Partick Thistle, not very good in the first half, but they got that all-important goal. Who emerges from this?
Well, again, without sounding like a broken record, it's tough to say, but on this one, I would think I would back Raith Rovers simply on the basis that the games are now starting to add up for Partick Thistle. And I've been there myself. I was involved in the first ever playoff in this setup, and we went to Queen of the South on the Tuesday and went to extra time against them on the Saturday at home. Then we played Hamilton on the Tuesday and the Saturday. And by the time the Saturday game came around, as much as there was adrenaline and that want and will to win, Hamilton were just fresher. I do think, on a side note, that the setup needs looked at. If they do want to keep with the, involving the fourth place team, then I think that it should be one fixture, and the team who finishes higher in the league should be at home to give them a better chance of promotion. But in terms of tomorrow night, I think both teams will score, Jonathan. But I think Raith Rovers' freshness and home advantage will count. And I think whilst Partick will run them close and grab a goal, I think Raith Rovers will get the job done and they'll get into the final.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, what's your take on the structure of it, Michael? Is it unfair for you? And when you look at Partick Thistle, I mean, I remember I was standing next to Brian Graham after the Adrionians match, and he'd been the hero, and his little boy was there, and it was fantastic and all the rest of it. I couldn't help thinking, with the sweat streaming down his face, hey, you look exhausted, and you've still got, potentially 4 more games to go. And I mean, it is such a tough ask for those teams. And because, as Rory mentions, the freshness of Raith Rovers, does that make them slight favourites as well for you?
It does, yeah. I mean, Raith finished about 14 points ahead of Thistle over the season. They've played them, I think, 5 times, and Thistle haven't beaten them this season yet.
That's right.
Not sure that's going to change this time either. Your general point on the structure is right. I suppose it's a legacy of, when the playoffs were introduced, it was almost done kind of grudgingly, wasn't it, by the top flight, in the sense that, okay, we'll give you that playoff, but it's kind of loaded in the favour of the top flight club, who can sit back for quite a long time and see the playoffs unfold, and then they would hope pick off the kind of winner. And it does tend to be the Premiership team that stays up, and I think that's probably quite revealing. Sometimes there's a gap. Sometimes there's a gap between the top flight and the second tier in terms of quality. But other times you think the team that's trying to come up with just run out of legs here. It's too intense a run of games, because they're all tense games as well. It's not like you're ambling into the playoff final. It's tension all the way through. So yeah, again, Raith have got a bad record in actually getting out of playoffs. I think it's 7 out of 7. They've not managed it. And they will worry that if it is St Johnstone or County that could happen again, if it is them that puts Partick away.
Yeah, 27 years I think it is since Raith Rovers were in the top flight. 6 for Partick Thistle, if memory serves correct. And I know this is probably getting ahead of ourselves a little bit, but just I want to get your thoughts on it. Raith or Partick Thistle versus St Johnstone or Ross County. How likely do you think we'll see the team from the top flight dropping out, Rory?
I think it all depends on who wins the ties, if I'm being honest. But especially, probably the biggest one on that would be tomorrow, in terms of the championship. Because I think if Raith Rovers win it, then they'll have a much better chance of beating the side who finishes second bottom. Again, the freshness we spoke about, but also the fact that Michael points out that, I mean, I'm not being disrespectful by saying that Raith Rovers are a better side. They finished 14 points ahead of Partick Thistle, so that's been proven over a 36-game season. So Raith Rovers deserve to be going into this game having played fewer games, and I do personally think they've got a better squad, a slightly better way of playing. So if Partick Thistle do manage to limp over the line, then I wouldn't give them half as much hope as I would give Raith Rovers if they were in the final. So I think if Raith Rovers go through, I would fancy Raith Rovers to get promotion.
And final word to you on that, Michael. I feel like you were about to make a very pertinent point.
Well, there's first time for everything, you know. I think, again, this is just a hunch, the same as Rory. I think if Ross County are in the playoffs, I think they'll be okay. You know, I was there the night that Ross County beat Rangers and really put a cat amongst the pigeons in terms of Rangers title chase, and it was a reminder of just, you know, they've got goals in the team, they've got good attitude. I think Don Cowie's been impressive. I think if it was St Johnstone and Raith Rovers, that would be fascinating, because St Johnstone don't score that many goals. Raith would be coming up, good season, would really fancy themselves to have a right crack at it. I think if I was St Johnstone, I'd be very worried about that. I think Partick Thistle would struggle against either of the Premiership teams. But, you know, let's see how it unfolds. There's still a lot of moving parts in this, but I think Raith would be a handful for St Johnstone. If that's the way it's looking at the moment, I guess, that those two will meet, and that would be fascinating, that play-off.
That's all we got time for today. Many thanks to Michael and Rory. And do remember Raith Rovers versus Partick Thistle in that huge playoff second leg live on Sports Scene on the BBC Scotland channel, 7:30 tomorrow night. Join us for that. It is not to be missed. Also not to be missed are daily episodes of the Scottish Football Podcast, so make sure you do follow or subscribe wherever you listen. Scottish Football, the gift that keeps on giving. Thanks for listening.
The Scotland Rugby Podcast is now available every Tuesday. Join me, Andy Burke and Tom English. Just head to BBC Sounds and subscribe to the Scotland Rugby Podcast.
It's just seismic stuff.
There's bucket hats as well.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Is this a rugby podcast or is this a fashion podcast?
Why can't it be a bit of both?
Rugby. Let's get on to rugby. There's a lot to be excited about. Today's guest, John McGuigan.
Clubs are at the absolute bedrock of everything Scottish rugby's about.
The Rugby Sports Sound Podcast from BBC Radio Scotland.
You cannot help but be so excited.
It's going to be the centre of the rugby universe.
BBC Sounds.